pleased to open up the conversation, I wanted to briefly introduce our amazing set of panelists. First, we're going to hear from Shan-Lyn Ma, who's the CEO of Zola. We're also going to hear from Benny Lee Liu, who's the founder and CEO of NextShark. We'll also hear from Chieh Huang, who's the CEO and co-founder of Boxed. And also, we have an amazing moderator. We're so thrilled to have public policy advocate and sister of our vice presidential candidate, Maya Harris. With that, it is now my pleasure to turn the conversation over to Maya. Maya, take it away. Maya, I think you're on mute. Maybe.
I'm off mute. Am I off mute now? Can you hear me?
Don't worry about it. We can hear you now.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Rhett. And hello to everyone else. I am so glad that we're having this conversation today. Joe and Kamala have been traveling around the country talking to small business owners. And, you know, like Rhett said, people are really struggling. But as he also said, what we all know, and certainly our business owners that we have here tonight they exemplify this, that it's also the case that our small businesses and our entrepreneurs are so critical for our communities, important to our communities, to the vibrancy of our communities, in supporting our communities, in employing our communities. And right now in the country, we're at a real crossroads when it comes to people being able to maintain their businesses, let alone being able to start or grow one. And so I think we're all just so delighted to be able to have Chieh and Benny and Shan here to be able to shed some light on what's happening for people like them and who are trying to contribute to our community and our country. And importantly, how we can all move forward together. So welcome, Chieh and Benny and Shan. And I want to just start because I personally admire so much people who have the courage to be entrepreneurs. I don't put myself in that category. People who have the courage to start a small business. My daughter is actually an entrepreneur. I was thinking maybe we could just kick off the conversation with each of you, just very briefly telling us why you decided to become an entrepreneur. And okay, why don't I start with Benny?
Cool. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Maya. And I appreciate feel honored to be in such an amazing panel with such amazing people. I guess you could say that for me, so I grew up in San Francisco to Chinese American parents that immigrated from mainland China in the 1980s. And I struggled a lot in school growing up. You know, whatever the model minority stereotypes were, I think I broke all of them. But I think, why did I become an entrepreneur? That's a very good question. I think that, you know, I think early in my years, I would say that I felt that I wasn't really good at anything else. And I didn't really take direction that well. So I figured, why not be the person that gives direction? But, you know, over the years, you know, I think that it's really blossomed into something where I just really love the people that I work with. And I feel that, you know, with a lot of the people right now that, you know, work for companies and startups and everything, I mean, you know, a healthy company culture that is inclusive and diverse is really, really important. And, you know, I think that for me, if I can be successful as an entrepreneur, I'm hoping that I'm able to, you know, build thriving communities with the people around me and hopefully enact some good positive changes in the things that I care about.
That's wonderful. How about you, Shan?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Shan. So I was born in Singapore. I grew up in Australia when my family moved there when I was very young. And then I moved myself to the US, first to California and then to New York 16 years ago. And the reason that I wanted to come to America was because I was hungry to be able to start a company, build something that touched the lives of millions of people, hopefully one day, as well as work with people who I saw in the US were all hungry to achieve the same thing, who were driven, excited to work, had the same values of an entrepreneurial spirit. And I've really seen that and loved it. And that's why I am all in staying here. But during the time that I've been here now, I started my own company, Zola, 7 years ago. Started it from scratch with a co-founder. 7 years later, we now employ over 150 people. We are the fastest growing wedding planning company in the US and one of the fastest growing consumer internet companies that allows people to plan their dream day. And we also serve a lot of small businesses who help our couples create the wedding of their dreams, from small businesses that have wedding venues, hairstylists, florists. And so we also care about making sure that small businesses are able to get through this tough time and tough year to see the other side.
And how about you, Chieh?
You know, parents immigrated from Taiwan back in the 80s, and we ended up here in Central Jersey, where I am today. You know, grew up in a town called Edison, New Jersey, where a bunch of different startups actually sprang out from our high school. And it was a regular public high school, but founder of Blue Apron was from our high school. 3 out of the 4 co-founders of Box are from that same high school. There's folks from naturebox.com. It is the wildest thing. It's just a regular high school in a middle-class town in Central Jersey. And when I think back to your original question, Maya, of like why, you know, I started the company, or why any entrepreneur starts the company, it's probably to, you know, 1, be your own boss, and 2, try to be financially successful. But I think as the small business owners on this call probably have found out, why you started it probably is not the same reason why you keep going. And that's what I've really kind of found out over the last 7 to 8 years of running Box, is that those initial reasons are no longer the reasons why I wake up every day energized to come to work. Those reasons have now been overtaken by a sense of purpose, a sense of motivation to make sure that the hundreds of associates that we have all across the country in each one of our fulfillment centers are proud of the company that they work for and have a salary that can put food on the table. And so I guess initially, you know, I wanted to be my own boss, but I guess the employees of the company in a very esoteric way have become my boss. And so it's come full circle. I knew we had made it when I woke up one morning a few years back and we were on NextShark.com. And so, Benny, I never told you that, but I was NextShark famous, and I was like, we're on to something, boys. We're on this website. So it's really good to be here with everyone.
I love that full circle moment. That is fantastic. I love that. It's also I mean, honestly, inspiring to hear you talk about what both sort of your origins coming here, why you decided to start the business. But I also know, just knowing business owners, particularly small business owners, having a daughter as an entrepreneur, there's the inspirational part, the exciting part, the motivating part, but it's also challenging. And so many small businesses now and entrepreneurs like you all have been really impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. And I was actually shocked to hear that more than 400,000 small businesses have permanently closed in the wake of Trump's mismanagement, as Rhett said earlier, of the pandemic. But we also know that many AAPI-owned businesses specifically have been hard hit, in no small part because of the kind of anti-Asian, frankly, sentiment driven by Trump, using derogatory, you know, and in my view, racist terms like Kung Flu, and the impact that along with the kind of broader dynamics of COVID-19, you know, have had this kind of impact, this negative impact on AAPI businesses specifically. Can each of you talk a little bit about how COVID-19 has affected your business and the trajectory? Because I know you, for example, Shan, talked about being one of the fastest growing businesses. So maybe we'll start with you, Shan.
Yeah, so given that we are in the weddings business, and weddings, of course, are large gatherings of people all in one place, which suddenly was not allowed and should not happen in a COVID-19 world, our business was certainly very affected. And you know, the first question we asked ourselves right from when we saw this was going to be a problem for our business is, let's plan based on how long we can expect this to last. And we have examples from other countries that started to go through it before us, where we could see the how long the wave lasts. We could project when we might expect it to be less of an impact on our business. And looking back now, it's kind of ridiculous, but at that time we were seeing, based on every other country, we would expect it to last and be somewhat over by June. Mm-hmm. And it has just been, through the gross mismanagement of this pandemic and this national health emergency, that we are still deep in it, that I think many businesses like ours that rely on people going out, leaving the house, gathering in groups, are affected. And so, while I feel grateful that our business will be able to make it through, I know that there's many other small businesses that we serve in our vendor community that are really struggling right now. And that affects our entire weddings industry, but more broadly than that, it affects our city. I live in New York. It affects our state and obviously our country. And in my mind, the sooner that we can get someone else to manage this crisis, the better every single business will be.
Let me, before I bring you and Benny and Chieh in, whether it is COVID-19 specific in terms of your response, in terms of impact on your business, or more the small kind of business community generally, and the impact of the Trump administration on the small business community generally. And the reason I kind of want to do either or both is that in addition to the AAPI specific issues, what we also know about the Trump administration is that it has consistently favored Wall Street over what we call Main Street, big corporations over smaller businesses and entrepreneurs. Another thing that I was surprised to see actually was that the Trump administration asked Congress to cut more than $200 million from small business programs just as coronavirus was beginning to take hold around the country. And so, either on, sort of the COVID-19 impact and or on the broader sort of small business community, could you talk a little bit about how you would say that the Trump administration has, failed to help or even has hurt small businesses more generally?
I think a prime example has been the confusion and just poor management of the PPP program, paycheck protection. And what we saw there was a lot of companies getting funds from that pool of money that really those large companies should not have gotten. And they received those funds, and who did not receive those funds were the small businesses who did not have the resources to know or understand how to apply to get those funds day one. And so, we've seen things run out or are just not accessible because small businesses, there wasn't a systematic way to communicate and distribute the funds to the most needed businesses. And that's why I think we've seen, the hundreds of thousands of small businesses go under, because the support that was meant to be there wasn't executed to get to the right people at the right time.
And then, Chieh, let me bring you in. How about, your own business or what you're seeing in terms of other businesses in terms of the impact in this environment and the harm, that's occurred in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, we see it firsthand because with our business, it's a little bit of a two-sided story in the sense that our business, the consumer business, in terms of selling toilet paper, selling disinfecting wipes, is through the roof. So we've greatly benefited from everything that's been going on. At the same time, we have a significant B2B business where we supply small businesses and business owners with the materials that they need to keep their businesses going. And so as an online wholesaler, most folks don't know that that's a big part of our business. And that business has plummeted. we're in a lucky position, almost what Shan-Lyn was saying before, of being able to weather through that storm, especially because our B2C business is doing so well. But for the folks that are not ordering from us, they're not ordering from us for a reason. And for some of those folks, it's not something that they're going to be able to weather. And to tie it all together to what Shan-Lyn was saying before, the administration of that PPP loan process in the beginning was just a disaster. The amount of fraud that's going on today, the amount of the difficulty in small businesses without stronger banking relationships to access those dollars really affected tons of businesses around the country. Nevertheless, well, that's not even beginning to talk about how we started this whole discussion of just like, hey, if we manage this thing better and we can all kind of defeat the coronavirus together or get it to a manageable place, then we can actually go out and resume a semi-normal life, which is really what small businesses need. And right now, I'm just not seeing that.
And Benny, how about you? Do you want to add something on this score?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I would say that the whole pandemic has affected my business in two ways, right? So for a little bit of context, even though NextShark.com, we're the largest, media destination for Asian Americans, we reach up to 15 million people a week on social media. We're still a very bootstrap small business at the very core. I mean, I started this company 7 years ago with $3,000 of my own money. We've never raised a round of funding, angel investors taking loans or anything. And so everything that, everybody sees today is just built on the backs of, our really, really supportive community and also just our insanely hardworking team that has been working day and night, right? Now, to get to the questions, I would say that in terms of financially and affecting as a business, it's definitely hit us pretty hard, especially early on. I mean, when March of this year hit, we had a lot of events and brand deals and advertising deals planned for the year, and it was supposed to be one of our better years. But obviously with everything hitting, people didn't advertise anymore. Obviously, you can't do in-person events anymore, and so frankly, I mean, our revenues went down by as high as 80%, in a month. So it was very, very concerning on that side. And then, but secondly, how it also has impacted us as a company in terms of, how we run operationally. I mean, even just prior to this year, a lot of our coverage was based on celebrating, the amazing strides of what a lot of Asian Americans were doing, whether, it was, let's say, Bong Joon-ho, who won, multiple Academy Awards, breaking a lot of records this year, to, Andrew Yang's surprise, success in his candidacy, right? It went from just a lot of just reporting of, celebration and profiling so many great individuals to, covering, this big increase in, hate crimes and racism and anti-Asian sentiments. I mean, just to give you some real numbers, I mean, even at March of last year, right? And prior to that, I think that in terms of news tips, we would get maybe 1 to 2 a week in terms of alleged, I guess, hate crimes or racist incidences that, that need to be, done. And when March hit, actually end of February up until March, up until I think summertime, we were getting up to 50, a day just across social media channels, just of, alleged hate crimes or, racist incidences that we need to take a look at. And just to give you some numbers, I mean, from 2020 alone, right, we've done about maybe over 600 stories about relating to coronavirus. Over 250 of them have been related to harassment and discrimination. Over 50 has been related to physical attacks. Now, on the plus side, we, over 200 have been, profiles and individuals of, Asian Americans, or just, people that are just doing their part in, helping the community, whether, you are an essential worker or whether you are making donations to essential workers and what have you. And so, it's nice to have that sort of silver lining.
Yeah.
Can I chime in here, Maya? So what Benny just said is the same whiplash that I felt over the last year of being an Asian American. It was I would say growing up, till about last year, it was I hit an all-time high of how proud I was to be an Asian American. Just you have BTS up the charts, you have Andrew Yang, you have Crazy Rich. It's just wow, we have a lot of things to be proud of. We're finally entering the mainstream of American culture, and to to suddenly kind of watch the news and to be denigrated almost every day, it's been really difficult. And yeah, I know sometimes folks defend it by saying that, well, we're not attacking Asian Americans, we're attacking the Chinese Communist Party. Well, the average person on the street doesn't know that. Like when I'm walking on the streets like of New York City, folks don't know if I'm like, if I'm Asian American or if I'm Asian. Like, and so, for the first time in a long time, I felt self-conscious about being Asian, and it was reflected as I wasn't joking about it. So I'm a avid reader of NextShark, and seeing kind of what you guys do, it really affected me, and it was a very whiplash of kind of my own kind of self-consciousness of who I am and where I come from.
Well, I'm actually glad that both of you took the conversation, kind of back, and out, because this is about our small businesses, but it's also about what that means for the broader community, right? Our broader community, AAPI community. And we're all here because we want to move away from the wreckage and the anti-Asian sentiment and, move toward, something better, away from what we have been experiencing during this period with the Trump administration. So let's shift gears. And why don't you each maybe give a word about why you decided to support the Biden-Harris ticket, specifically. Obviously there are two choices in this election. You're here because you support that ticket, but there may be people who haven't figured out what they want to do yet. So why are you supporting the ticket? And I'm going to start with you, Shan.
So the things that I care most about are, I think particularly with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is first and foremost defending human rights, equality of people of different gender, sexual orientation, race, whatever someone is, they should be considered a human being and not lesser than anyone else. And that it's just crazy that we should even be worried about this in 2020, but there's never been a more urgent time to be worried about this. And first and foremost, we need to make sure that the Supreme Court stays the institution that it is currently. So that's first and foremost is let's make sure we defend the rights for ourselves and for future generations. I think the second thing is the most urgent issue of COVID. How can we, make sure we have a competent commander-in-chief back in the seat to make sure we can all go back to work and, and frankly, not all die in the next few months. I would say the last thing is really, how can we not just make sure that we are not losing rights, but also advance equality? We know that there are, minorities in this country that even today need a lot more support than they've been getting. And I think, for our sake, for our children's sake, we need to continue the march to support, whether it's Asian Americans or our friends in the Black community or Native Americans. That's important to me. And lastly, the most pressing issue, apart from the ones I've mentioned, is climate change and how can we save this planet.
Mm-hmm. Benny, then Chieh.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple for me. I just want everyone to get along and things to get back to normal. I think that it's no secret. At least for me, personally, just felt like like our country is more divided than ever, and I just see so much hate online and just so much division. And I think that we need to have somebody leading this country that can properly, communicate great values, but also like really bring people together, right? And I think that communication is just really key. And, with the rhetoric that our president has been, putting out, especially, this year, I mean, I just don't think that it's been very effective, and I guess, for lack of a better word, in bringing people together. And so I think that that's really what's most important. That's what I hopefully look forward to.
Chieh?
Yeah, for me, it's two really simple things. One, along the same lines, is unity. This country just needs for both the left and the right to come together in a lot of sense to become a stronger country and to get back on the right track. And I truly believe, I think between Joe and Kamala, they're the right team to do that. I also think it's about service in the sense that, in the initial video, as this panel got started, you heard the words that Joe said. It's like, it's not about me, it's about you. And again, bringing it back to the kind of small business community that's on this webinar right now, you're probably sitting there and struggling and going through the everyday difficulties of running a business because it's no longer just about you. It's about the people that depend on you to put food on the table. And tying that together with what Joe said, I truly believe that he feels like it's about the service of the American people, whether you vote for him or not. And that presidents and our leaders of our country cannot just simply, do what's right for the people that voted for them and say, screw everyone else. And I think Joe and Kamala believe that. You could hear it in their voice, you could see it in their actions. And I hope we'll see it in their actions over the next 4 to 8 years.
Well, I can tell you, since I have a personal connection, they really do believe that. And they really do intend to do that. So I will get in trouble if I don't wrap this conversation up soon, but I'm an eternal optimist. So I'm going to take a moderator privilege here, but I'm going to ask you to only do it in one sentence, which is, even in the midst of all the challenges we're facing, can we please close this conversation out by hearing in one sentence from each of you, what brings you hope in the AAPI entrepreneurial community? Because Chieh and Benny, you both talked about we were in a kind of zen, happy, moving forward moment, and then stuff got whack. And so tell me one sentence, each of you, and then Shan, what brings you hope?
AAPIs. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Chieh, go.
AAPIs are resilient.
Benny.
The community, to be honest. I mean, like, it's clear that there is so much, that there is good in our world, and let's just focus on that.
Shan.
I've seen over the last few months, and particularly, the excitement around the announcement of Kamala joining the ticket, is more than ever, this community has gotten together to brainstorm and act on all the things we can do to make sure that we get out the vote. And that rallying and locking arms to do this together is just the most exciting thing I've ever seen, being a part of this community. Well,
that's an exciting, very inspiring way to end this part of our program. So Chieh, Benny, and Shan, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to be signing off in a moment, but I just want to say thank you to everyone who also tuned in and speak to you for 1 second, which is, I know you're hearing this a lot. You're only hearing it a lot because it is actually true. This is the most important election of our lifetime. I also want to say that I am so convinced that we can do this, but it is going to take all of us doing something to help bring this home. So we need your help these next 40 days. And yes, I said 40 days because there are only 40 days left until Election Day, which is hard to believe. So I'm going to ask you to do 2 things right now. One is go to joebiden.com/smallbusiness. Or text BIZ, B-I-Z, to 30330 so that we can stay in touch with you and let you know how you can help Joe and Kamala win this thing. And then 2, we really need you to make your voting plan and to remind your family and your friends and your neighbors to make their voting plan too. And what you can do is you can go to iwillvote.com to check your registration deadlines, to request your absentee ballot, to make your plan for when and how you will cast your vote. But you really need to make a plan. This is so important. We all get so busy. We got to know when we're going to take care of the most important thing that you really can do in the next, few weeks, which is to have a plan to cast your vote and to actually cast it. We need you. We're thankful for what you have already done. Thank you for showing up tonight. Let's make this happen. Let's get this done. And now I'm going to turn it over to Amit, who's going to kick off the second part of the program. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Maya, and thank you to all our wonderful panelists. Really appreciate all your participation and your support. Hello, everyone. I'm Amit Jani. I'm the National AAPI Director for the Biden campaign. Thank you for all your support and all that you're doing throughout the country, throughout the key battleground states to really ensure that Vice President Biden and Senator Harris do make history and become the next president and vice president of the United States. So tonight's very personal to me. Growing up in Jersey City, being an immigrant from India, small business is really how my family thrived and survived. We grew up in an inner city across from New York, where they had their small businesses when they first emigrated here. And it's just been an amazing journey seeing my parents and all that they've done and accomplished and actually reaching the American dream to where they're at now. So it's really personal to me that, I'm here because of small businesses and small business community is so important to the AAPI community as a whole. Because so many of us, whether you're South Asian, East Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, we're vastly represented in the small business community. And recently, unfortunately, I've also seen, the downturn that COVID has caused, on the small business community, particularly the Asian American community. My mom, similar to a lot of other Asian American immigrants, has some language issues, had some issues applying for PPP and other loans and grants. And, she asked me and I think similar to most of you, who've been helping their parents or families with their small businesses, she asked me to help apply. And I saw firsthand how difficult it was even for me to apply. And unfortunately, she didn't receive the PPP on the first stage when she really needed it. So, again, going back to Maya's point and all the participants, panelists' points about the mismanagement of this crisis and where we could be had it not been for this mismanagement of Donald Trump and the GOP party. And not only that, but they're further, as other folks have mentioned, Trump has instigated and really put out xenophobic and racist rhetoric against the AAPI community, like Maya mentioned, calling it the China virus, attacking the Asian American reporter in the Rose Garden of the White House. So that further exacerbates the issue with the small business community within the AAPI space, particularly with restaurants and grocery stores, where they're hit with a double whammy of COVID and COVID-related racism. And the vice president, he's spoken out early and often, pushing back on this xenophobic rhetoric, calling for it to end, calling for the president to stop using that language, using that rhetoric, using those terms, attacking the Asian American community. So we know that AAPI-owned businesses, are unfortunately overrepresented in the hardest hit sectors, representing 26% of accommodations and food service, 17% of retail trade, 11% of education service businesses. And we've seen a 10% national decline in active AAPI business owners between February and January. More broadly, we've seen more than 400,000 small businesses collapse in the wake of Trump's tragic mismanagement of the current crisis. 75% of small businesses have been negatively impacted by the current crisis. More than 1 in 6 small businesses remain shuttered and may never, ever reopen. And over half of small businesses say it will take more than 6 months to return to normal operations, or they'll never fully recover again. So again, a lot of these issues like many of the speakers before me have said could have been avoided, and unfortunately they haven't. And especially in the AAPI community, where we're overrepresented in the small business space, this is particularly hurtful. And that's why I think tonight is just such an important opportunity for the AAPI business community to really come together and get out the vote. And that's what we're going to talk more about as my colleague Rhett will provide the training. So thank you again for all that you're doing and your support. We really feel that the AAPI community will be the difference. And within there, the small business community can really put us over the top. So thank you again for all that you're doing. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Rhett Buttle.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Amit. And I want to thank you for being an amazing colleague and partnering on this. Amit was in on the campaign early. I've just been here a few weeks, and I feel like it's been a really long time. It's long hours on these campaigns. And so Amit has been here from the start. And so your dedication to a better America for your community, but for all of us is really, really admirable. As I talked about at the top, what we want to do tonight is we really want to move from having important conversations to moving to action. We just can't touch everyone we need to touch to win this election without help from you. And we know small business owners are integral to their communities, and they touch their employees and their friends, and they're seen as leaders. This week, we were so thrilled to announce the launch of a new program called Mobilize Main Street, which is an action toolkit that allows small businesses to take that next step. In the kit that you'll be receiving after this, you'll get small business for Biden-Harris, useful information, key messages, digital content, emails that you can send to your staff, or professional networks. For those of you who want to maybe write a letter or op-ed, you can do that too. And also a printable sign so that you can show your visibility, because we need the visibility in the community. And anything you can do, we really appreciate it. It is now my pleasure to turn the conversation over to a partner who's going to walk through a training for those of you who are employers about ways that you can serve as community leaders and begin to take those next steps. So with that, it's my pleasure to turn the conversation over to a friend and a colleague, Jim Doyle, who's the president of Business Forward, who's going to walk us through their nonpartisan employer toolkit for those of you who want to get engaged. So Jim, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Red. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here today. So this toolkit that you're seeing on the screen is available. It's there's a link in your RSVP. You can also find it at businessfwd.org. And as we go through the slides, you'll see lots of logos. All you need to do is just click on any one of those logos when you've downloaded the toolkit. It'll take you directly where you need to go. And if you have any questions at the end of this, please email us at info@businessfwd.org. Next slide. So there are essentially 5 things you can do as an employer to help get out the vote. The first is help your employees register, learn about the candidates and the issues, and find out where, when, and how to vote. Second is to give them time to vote on election day, or encourage them to vote early. Third is to join one of several coalitions encouraging early voting and registration. Fourth, you can speak out on your own about policies that make voting easier. And the last thing is to stand up for voters most likely to be silenced or suppressed. Next slide. First, there's getting started. Earlier in this webinar, we talked about iwillvote.com. There's a nonpartisan alternative. It's vote.org. If you're talking to your friends, your neighbors, your family, you can encourage them to vote for Joe. If you're talking to your employees, you can. It's a simple do and don't. You need to encourage your employees to vote. You can't encourage them to vote for a particular candidate. So we recommend you send them to vote.org, a nonpartisan source. It'll get them going. It's everything they need. We also encourage you to consider finding a partner that fits your company's culture and your employees' point of view. What we found is that the partners that seem to work best are the ones that work through the arts or through music. It just gets people revved up to vote. Go Vote is artists coming together to encourage people to vote. Headcount works with musicians, record labels, and concert promoters. Ignite is an organization led by and for Gen Z women. So there are all sorts. And if you look at the full toolkit online, we have links to several of them. Next slide, please. If you want to make the biggest impact, encourage your employees to vote early. Lines are shorter during early voting, it's a lot easier for workers with young children, a second job, or earning a degree at night. Chances are your employees do not know when early voting starts. So again, on this slide, just click on a link and you'll see registration deadlines, early voting deadlines, absentee requests, and election day. Again, vote.org has all this too. Next slide. We encourage you to focus on your employees who need the help most. Young people are 20% less likely to vote than the national average. People of color are more likely to face obstacles to voting. There are a number of organizations that you can point them to that speak to these populations specifically. Voto Latino, New Voters Project, Next Gen America focuses on young people who through climate change. Again, there are dozens of really amazing organizations, and we encourage you to find one that fits your employees' interests and their passions. It'll just work better. And again, if you download the toolkit, you'll be able to click on any of these links and get where you need to go. Next slide. We encourage you to speak out, and I think there's a really important point that employers need to understand. There's been a flip. Big companies have helped their employees vote for decades, but small business owners traditionally have been a little reluctant because they've seen this as political. That's not the case with their employees or with consumers. Consumers want brands to engage. 8 out of 10 of consumers believe companies should take action. 8 out of 10 prefer to buy from companies that support democracy. Similar results in surveys of employees about their employer. It's particularly important for CEOs to get involved. It creates a culture of voting, and it really inspires the younger workers. What's happened over the last few years is we've gone from an environment where people are worried about getting involved in voting to a point where they're worried about not getting involved. You have a bigger risk of doing nothing than you do of doing something. There are a couple organizations that I would flag in this Act Now box. ElectionDay.org and Time to Vote have each recruited several hundred major companies to get behind giving employees time to vote. It's just they're tremendous organizations, and frankly, there's safety in numbers. So we encourage you to go there. And then we'll talk about power to the polls in the future side. That's also an important one. Next slide, please. If you have time, or if you've got employees who are really motivated, the best thing you can do is to become a poll worker or a poll watcher. First, let's just cover the difference. Poll workers are trained by local election boards to identify problems and serve at polling places during the election. It's a nonpartisan role where you work to ensure a successful election process. These, in most cases, are paid positions, and they're nonpartisans. There's a great resource. It's called Power the Polls, that is helping people find out how to get trained and how to get involved. This is really important this year because in a typical election, 6 out of 10 poll workers are senior citizens. And with the pandemic, it's unlikely that most of those people will be able to work this year. So we need to replace those older poll workers with younger ones. If you're not interested in being a poll worker, you can also be a poll watcher. These are recruited by the political parties to protect people casting their vote. They monitor incidents of voter intimidation at the polls. On this page, you'll see a link to be a poll watcher. Those go to the Republican Party poll watcher website and the Democratic Party poll watcher website. Again, if you're working with your employees, you really do need to give them, you need to give them the option. Next slide. We also think it's really important for employers to be briefed on mail-in voting, the facts. The first thing is that the last 2 elections, 1 out of 4 ballots were cast by mail. 28 states already encourage vote by mail without asking for a reason. It's enjoyed bipartisan support for years. This is, the criticism is new, and it's just a Trump invention, unfortunately. There are 5 states that vote exclusively by mail, and they all have the same results. They have higher turnout, they have lower costs, and they have very, very little voter fraud. In 2016, these 5 states reported 112 cases of potential fraud out of 11 million ballots cast. Now, when you're talking to people, it's important to understand that there's a difference between fraud and error, and that error is the much bigger risk. And the risk of error rises if you move from mail-in voting to in-person voting, and it's pretty simple. Voters often show up at the wrong polling location, whereas a mailed ballot goes to the person who requested it, and only them. It can only be used by them. So mail-in voting is actually much safer. If you've got your employees are asking questions about this, encourage them to vote by mail, provided they vote early. Next slide. So again, we have a number of others. We have all sorts of other resources. We've got sample emails you can send to your employees. We've got case studies from Fortune 500 companies, it's all available on our toolkit, which you can find at info@businessfwd.org. You'll also see a link if you've registered for this webinar. And if you have any questions, just email us at info@businessfwd.org. We'd love to help you help your employees register and vote. Thank you.
And with that, we just want to thank everyone again for being here tonight. We really appreciate that so much. We really need your help. 40 days to go, less than 40 days. And again, the AAPI community can really make the difference across the country in key battleground states, and the small business community within the AAPI space in particular. So please help us organize. If you can help us phone bank, we have AAPI phone banks as well, but please encourage other small business owners that to also get involved, and also again help with the Biden efforts as well. So thank you again so much for all that you're doing, for all your support. Please go to joebiden.com if you want to learn more about our small business policies or how to get involved. And again, thank you so much for your support. We look forward to working with you these next 6 weeks. Have a good night. Thank you.